Good evening, and welcome to Whispered Dreams. I am the storyteller, back with you after a short break. Tonight, I want to tell you about Griffin, his peaceful life in a quiet mountain village, and its disruption when a mysterious wind calls out to him. This will be a longer story. You'll hear my voice a lot more, and hopefully will sink you into tranquility. So let's get started. Chapter 1. The Whisper on the Breeze. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the valley, casting the sky in a soft palette of pink and gold. The mountains, tall and eternal, stood guard over the village where Griffin had spent his entire life. The quiet routine of the day had come to an end, and the villagers were retreating into their homes, content with the simplicity of their lives. Griffin, however, felt the pull of something more, a sense that beyond these peaceful hills lay something he had never discovered. He often took evening walks along the riverbank, a place where the gentle flow of water matched the rhythm of his thoughts. Tonight, the air was crisp, the breeze just enough to carry the coolness of the approaching night. As he sat by the water's edge, watching the ripples distort the fading light, a peculiar sensation washed over him. The wind, normally a soft caress, seemed to grow heavier, carrying with it an unfamiliar sound. It wasn't the rustling of leaves or the usual hum of nature. This was different, quieter, more intentional. Griffin closed his eyes, letting the breeze brush against his skin. And then he heard it. A whisper, clear but faint. It was as if the wind was speaking to him. Griffin. Griffin. His heart quickened. He opened his eyes and looked around. He was expecting to see someone nearby. But the fields were empty, save for the rustling of grasses swaying under the dusk. The voice, if it could be called that, seemed to linger in the air, carried along by the invisible currents. Griffin, seek the winds. His brow furrowed in confusion. He had never heard of winds that spoke, nor of anything mystical in these quiet lands. Yet the voice seemed undeniable, as if the world itself was reaching out to him, urging him to listen. The wind shifted again, gentler this time, as if coaxing him to follow. Griffin stood, his heart now thumping steadily in his chest, filled with both wonder and apprehension. Was this real? Or was his mind playing tricks on him? After too many nights spent imagining life beyond the valley. He gazed up at the sky, now painted in deeper hues of twilight, stars just beginning to wink into existence, The air felt charged, alive with possibilities. "I must be dreaming," he murmured to himself, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just begun. As Griffin made his way back to the village, the wind seemed to follow him, nudging him forward like a gentle reminder of the words it carried. The houses stood in neat rows, small and warm, their windows glowing with the soft light of oil lamps. The village itself was calm, as it always had been. Life here was slow, predictable, a sanctuary of peace nestled among the mountains. But tonight, Griffin felt a tug, an invisible thread pulling him away from the comforts of home. At the heart of the village, there stood an elder's house, its wooden beams worn smooth by the passage of time. The elder was the keeper of knowledge in this small community, someone who had seen and understood far more than any of the younger folk. If anyone could explain this strange phenomena, it would be him. Griffin approached the house, hesitating for a moment before knocking lightly on the door. It creaked open almost immediately, as if the elder had been expecting him. "Griffin," came the elder's deep, gravelly voice. "I knew you would come." The old man stood in the doorway, his silver hair catching the light of the day. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a certain wisdom, a knowing that Griffin had always found both comforting and unnerving. "Come in, boy," the elder said, stepping aside to let him in. Griffin entered the small, warm room, the scent of dried herbs hanging in the air. The elder's home was filled with old scrolls and trinkets from journeys long past, each telling a story that Griffin had yet to hear. He sat down at the low wooden table, hands resting on his knees, unsure how to begin. "The wind," started Griffin. "It spoke to me." The elder smiled, a knowing look crossing his face as if this revelation was expected. "And what did it say?" the old man asked, lowering himself into the chair across from Griffin. "It told me to follow, to seek the winds," Griffin replied, still unsure of his own words. "Is that possible? Can the wind really speak?" The elder nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. "There are many things in this world that we cannot fully understand, Griffin. The wind is but one of nature's many, many voices. It speaks to those who are ready to listen." Griffin frowned. "But why me? I've lived here all my life, and I've never heard anything like this." The elder chuckled softly. "You've lived here, yes, but your heart has always been elsewhere. You've felt it, haven't you? That pull, that sense that there's more beyond these hills. Griffin's chest tightened. He had always felt it, but he had never put it into words. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. The elder reached behind him and pulled out an object wrapped in cloth. With careful hands, he unwrapped it, revealing an ornate compass, its needle spinning lazily, even though there was no breeze in the room. This, the elder said, placing the compass gently in Griffin's hands, is no ordinary compass. It will not point to the north or to any other cardinal direction. It points to the winds, to where your journey is meant to take you. Griffin stared at the delicate instrument, its golden surface reflecting the flickering firelight. The needle was slowly settling, pointing toward a direction that seemed unfamiliar, toward the unknown. "You are being called, Griffin," the elder continued, his voice soft but firm. "The wind speaks to those who are ready. There are places out there that need you, knowledge that waits for you to uncover it." Griffin looked up, meeting the elder's eyes. "But how will I know where to go? What if I lose my way?" The elder smiled again, his wrinkles deepening. "The compass will guide you, but only if your mind is calm and your heart is open. Trust in it and trust yourself. The winds will show you the way." Griffin felt a mixture of excitement and fear rising within him. His whole life had been spent in this small village. Yet now, the world beyond seemed to beckon him with an irresistible pull. "Go home tonight," the elder said, rising to his feet. "Rest. Tomorrow, the winds will guide you. You will know when it's time to leave." Griffin nodded, clutching the compass tightly in his hand. He stood and made his way to the door, pausing briefly as the elder spoke one last time. "Remember, Griffin," the old man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The winds are always with you. You need only listen." With that, Griffin stepped out into the cool night air, the whispering breeze already beginning to stir around him. As he made his way back home, the compass warm in his hand, Griffin felt the pull of adventure like never before. The stars above shimmered, as if welcoming him to the beginning of a journey that would take him far beyond the boundaries of what he had ever known. The wind whispered once more, "Griffin." Chapter 2. A Quiet Departure. The night slowly passed for Griffin. He lay in his bed, staring up at the wooden beams of the ceiling, his mind racing with the possibilities ahead. The compass sat on a small table beside him, its needle still pointing steadily toward some unknown destination. Despite the stillness of his surroundings, the excitement bubbling inside him made sleep elusive. The wind whispered faintly outside his window, a soft reminder that something larger was at play, that his journey was about to begin. When sleep finally claimed him, it was filled with strange dreams, images of distant lands, shifting winds, and paths that twisted and turned in ways he couldn't understand. Morning came, bringing with it a gentle light that crept into his room. Griffin sat up, feeling the weight of the day before him. The familiar comfort of the village surrounded him, but the call of the wind lingered in the air, urging him forward. He dressed quietly, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he would soon leave behind everything he knew. The peaceful village that had been his home all his life was no longer enough. There was something more waiting for him, something he could no longer ignore. As he stepped outside, the morning air was crisp and cool, the sky clear and blue. The village was already stirring with the quiet activity of daily life. Farmers tending to their fields, mothers preparing meals, children running through the streets in playful games. It was all so familiar, so comforting, and yet Griffin knew that today he would be leaving it all behind. He walked slowly through the village, taking in every detail as if it were for the last time. The thatched roof cottages, the cobblestone paths, the distant sound of the river flowing just beyond the fields. He wondered how long it would be before he saw it all again, or if he ever would. His feet led him to the village square, where a few early risers had already gathered, chatting casually about the day ahead. Among them was Rhea, a childhood friend with whom Griffin had spent countless hours exploring the forests and hills that bordered the village. She noticed him across the square and waved, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Griffin," she called, making her way toward him. "You're up early. Planning another one of your walks?" Griffin smiled, though his heart was heavy, and the knowledge that this walk would be unlike any he had ever taken before. "I suppose you could say that," he replied, trying to keep his voice light. Rhea raised an eyebrow, sensing something different in his tone. "What's going on? You seem distant." Griffin hesitated, unsure how to explain. He could tell her that the wind had spoken to him, that he was being called away to unknown places. It sounded impossible, even to him, and yet the truth of it weighed heavily on his chest. "I'm leaving," he said finally. the words feeling strange on his tongue. Ria's smile faltered. Leaving? What do you mean? Griffin took a deep breath, searching for the right words. I don't know how to explain it, but something is calling me. I have to go. There's something out there that I need to find. Ria's expression shifted from confusion to concern. You're not serious, are you? Leaving the village? Griffin, you've never been anywhere else. I know, he said softly, but it's something I have to do. I don't fully understand it myself, but the Elder, he gave me this. He pulled the compass from his pocket, showing her the strange instrument. It's guiding me somewhere. I can't ignore it. Ria stared at the compass, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. Griffin, are you sure about this? If you're wrong, what if it's just, I don't know, a dream? Griffin shook his head. It's not a dream, Ria. I wish I could explain it better, but I know I have to go. Ria's eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed to wrestle with her thoughts. Finally, she sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. I don't understand, Griffin, she said quietly. But if this is what you feel you have to do, then I won't try to stop you. Just promise me that you'll be careful and that you'll come back. Griffin smiled, though the sadness in her voice weighed on him. I promise, he said. I'll come back. I don't know when, but I will. Ria nodded, though the worry didn't leave her eyes. I'll hold you to that. With a final embrace, she turned and walked away, leaving Griffin standing alone in the village square. The wind picked up again, gently urging him onward. He took one last look around, memorizing the sights and the sounds of the place he had called home for so long. He made his way to the edge of the village, where the path led out toward the forest and beyond. The trees rustled softly in the breeze, their leaves shimmering in the early morning light. The road ahead was unfamiliar, stretching out toward the horizon like a thread waiting to be followed. Griffin paused at the boundary, feeling the weight of the moment. His journey was beginning, and though he didn't know where it would take him, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The compass in his hand pulsed softly, its needle pointing firmly ahead, as if to say, it's time. With a deep breath, Griffin stepped onto the path. The village, with all its familiar comforts, faded into the background as he walked, replaced by the steady rhythms of his footsteps and the ever-present whisper of the wind. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the landscape began to shift. The trees grew taller and denser, the branches intertwining above him. They cast dappling shadows on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. The distant call of birds echoed through the canopy. Griffin moved with purpose, the compass guiding him forward. The path twisted and turned, sometimes vanishing altogether, but the needle always pointed ahead, steady and sure. He felt a calm settle over him, as if the wind itself was watching over him, leading him towards something important. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, higher, and higher into the sky, casting long beams of light through the trees. Griffin's mind wandered as he walked, reflecting on the life he had left behind. He thought of Rhea, of the elder, of the village he had known all his life. It all seemed so distant now, as if it was part of another world. Just as he began to wonder how far he had come, the forest opened up into a wide clearing. In the center stood a single, massive oak, its branches stretching out like arms to the sky. Beneath its shade, a small stone bench rested, worn smooth by time and weather. Griffin approached the tree, feeling a strange pull toward it. The wind, which had been constant as a companion, seemed to grow quieter here, as if waiting for something. He sat down on the bench, letting the cool shade wash over him, and for the first time since he had left the village, he allowed himself to rest. The wind whispered again, soft and distant. Griffin, wait. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, the gentle sway of the branches above. There was no rush now, no urgency. The journey had begun, but for now, he was exactly where he needed to be. The wind would guide him when it was time. For now, he would wait. Chapter 3. The Call of the Oak. Griffin sat beneath the towering oak tree, its ancient branches arching high above like a natural cathedral. Time seemed to slip away as he sat there, the peaceful quiet of the clearing filling him with a deep sense of calm. The wind, which had been whispering to him since the journey began, had gone silent for the moment, allowing him a chance to pause and reflect. The sun was well into its climb when a faint sound caught his ear. A soft rustling, different from the gentle swish of leaves in the breeze. Griffin looked around, scanning the forest edge. Out from behind a clump of bushes emerged a small, curious creature. Its fur was soft golden brown, and its eyes were large, almost glowing, reflecting a certain intelligence that seemed almost human. It was a fox, small and slender, with an air of elegance about it, as it approached cautiously. Griffin watched in silence amazed by the creature's beauty. He remained still, not wanting to startle it, and to its surprise, the fox didn't seem afraid. It stopped a few feet away, tilting its head slightly as if studying him. "Hello there," Griffin murmured softly, unsure if the creature would understand. To his astonishment, the fox blinked slowly, as if acknowledging his greeting. Then, as if deciding that he could be trusted, it padded closer, its small paws making no sound on the soft earth. It sat down next to him, watching him with an intensity that made Griffin feel as if there he was in the presence of a wise old friend. The two sat together in comfortable silence for a few moments. Griffin felt a strange sense of companionship with the fox, as if it too understood the pull of the journey he had begun. The animal's presence was calming, almost reassuring, and he couldn't help but feel that it had been waiting for him. Finally, the fox let out a soft, almost musical bark, breaking the silence. Griffin chuckled. "Are you here to guide me too?" The fox's ears perked up, and it stood, turning to look back toward the forest. It paused, glancing at Griffin, as if urging him to follow. Without hesitation, Griffin rose to his feet, feeling the same pull he had felt when the elder had handed him the compass. He slipped the small instrument into his pocket, allowing the fox to lead the way. The creature trotted ahead with a graceful ease, darting between trees and stepping every so often to look back and make sure Griffin was following. He moved quickly to keep up, his heart pounding with excitement. It felt as though he were chasing after something just beyond his reach, the promise of discovery driving him forward. The forest began to change as they went deeper. The trees grew older, their trunks thick, their branches heavy with moss. Sunlight filtered down in thin beams, casting a soft green glow over everything. There was a sense of timelessness here, as if this part of the forest had remained untouched for centuries. After what felt like hours, they reached another clearing. In its center was something unexpected. A small stone well, half covered in ivy, its edges worn smooth with age. The fox stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching Griffin with a look that seemed almost expectant. Griffin approached the well, feeling a strange pull toward it. The air around it felt different, charged with a kind of energy he couldn't quite explain. He peered over the edge, into the darkness below. There was no water, only a deep, endless void that seemed to stretch as far as it could beneath the earth. A soft whisper brushed against his mind, a gentle nudge urging him to reach into the well. Tentatively, he lowered his hand into the darkness, feeling the cool stone as he leaned closer. Just as he was about to pull back, his fingers brushed against something smooth and cool. He grasped it carefully, pulling it into the light. In his hand lay a small crystal, clear and intricately faceted, catching the sun in a way that made it seem to glow from within. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, as if it was alive. The fox let out a quiet yip, drawing Griffin's attention. It was watching him with an expression that almost seemed approving, as if it knew he had found something important. "What is this?" Griffin whispered, turning the crystal around in his hand. It felt strangely familiar, as though he had held it before, though he knew he hadn't. The wind picked up around him, swirling through the clearing in a sudden gust. It seemed to carry a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakably there. "Seek the light, the path, the truth." Griffin closed his eyes, listening to the words as they faded into the breeze. When he opened them again, the fox was still there, watching him patiently. He looked back down at the crystal, wondering what it could mean. He had a feeling it was part of the journey, a piece of the larger puzzle that was slowly beginning to reveal itself. As he held it, he felt a sense of clarity settle over him. The journey was not just a physical one. It was also a journey within, a quest for understanding, for wisdom that lay hidden beyond the surface of everyday life. He slipped the crystal into his pocket, feeling its weight alongside the compass. Somehow, the two seemed to complement each other, as though they were pieces of the same mystery. The fox barked again, softer this time, as if to remind him that there was still much to discover. Griffin nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose as he followed his companion back through the forest. The two of them traveled in silence, moving steadily through the woods. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows that danced across the forest floor. Griffin's mind was alive with questions, but he knew that the answers would come in their own time. The wind, the crystal, the compass, they were all pieces of a story that was only just beginning to unfold. As they reached the edge of the forest, Griffin noticed a faint glow in the distance. It was a small village, nestled at the base of the hill, its windows glowing warmly in the early evening light. The sight filled him with a strange sense of nostalgia, even though he had never been there before. The fox paused, looking back at him one last time before it turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving him alone at the edge of the forest. Griffin felt a pang of sadness as he watched it go, but he knew that their paths had diverged. The fox had guided him this far, but the next steps would be his alone. With a deep breath, Griffin stepped out of the forest and made his way toward the village. The road was quiet, the sound of his footsteps echoing softly in the cool evening air. He clutched the compass in his hand, feeling its warmth as it pulsed faintly, guiding him forward. As he entered the village, he noticed the simple charm of its houses. Their stone walls and thatched roofs reminding him of his own home. A few villagers were milling about, going about their evening routines. They looked at him curiously, but no one spoke. At the center of the village was a small inn, its windows glowing with the warm light of a fire. Griffin felt his exhaustion settle over him as he approached, his legs aching from the day's journey. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, greeted by the comforting warmth and the scent of baked bread and herbs. The innkeeper was a kindly old woman with silver hair and a warm smile that greeted him. "Welcome, traveler," she said, her voice soft and welcoming. "You look like you've come a long way." Griffin nodded, managing a tired smile. "I have. I'm seeking something." The innkeeper's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Aren't we all?" she said with a gentle laugh. "Come sit by the fire. I'll bring you something to eat." He thanked her and took a seat near the hearth, the warmth soothing his weary bones. As he sat there, his mind drifted back to the day's events. The fox, the well, the crystal that now rested in his pocket. The journey was only beginning, and yet he felt as though he had already come so far. The innkeeper returned with a bowl of warm stew and a hunk of bread, setting it down before him. "Eat up, young one," she said kindly. "The road ahead is long, but you'll find your way." Griffin smiled, grateful for the comfort of a warm meal and a place to rest. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as he felt his strength returning. As he finished, he glanced down at the compass, its needle still pointing toward a direction unknown. The wind whispered faintly outside, a reminder that his journey was far from over. With quiet resolve, Griffin settled into his chair, letting the warmth of the fire lull him into a peaceful rest. The path lay ahead, and with it, the answers he sought. For now, he would rest, trusting that the winds would guide him when the time was right. Chapter 4. An Encounter in the Village. The morning sunlight filtered through the window, warming Griffin's face as he slowly stirred awake. For a moment, he simply lay there, letting the quiet peace of the inn settle over him. The journey so far felt like a dream, a whisper of wind, a guiding compass, and a mysterious fox that had led him through the forest. He sat up, the crystal in his pocket warming slightly as he moved. Griffin smiled, feeling the familiar tug in his heart as he remembered the village waiting outside. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, where the innkeeper was bustling about, preparing breakfast for the few other guests scattered around the common room. The innkeeper spotted him and offered a warm smile. "Good morning, young one. I trust you slept well." "Yes, very well, thank you," Griffin replied, taking a seat at a small wooden table by the window. Outside, the village was beginning to wake, the streets bathed in the golden light of early morning. The innkeeper brought him a plate of fresh bread, cheese, and fruit. Griffin thanked her, savoring each bite as he ate. He felt refreshed, his mind clear and ready to face the day. As he finished, he noticed a man sitting at a table nearby, watching him with quiet curiosity. The man was tall and lean, with a dark cloak wrapped around his shoulders and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. He nodded to Griffin, a faint smile on his face. "Traveling alone, are you?" the man asked, his voice calm and steady. Griffin hesitated, wondering how much to share. "Yes," he replied, carefully. "I'm following something. It's hard to explain." The man's smile widened slightly, as he understood more than he let on. "Is that so? You look like a young man with a purpose. Not many pass through this village without reason." Griffin felt a spark of curiosity. "Have you been here long?" "Oh, longer than most," the man replied with a chuckle. "But I, too, was once a traveler. This village has a way of calling to those on a journey, those seeking something more." Griffin leaned forward, intrigued. "Do you know why that is?" The man took a sip from his mug, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mystery. "There are places in this world where the boundaries between the seen and the unseen grow very thin. The village sits on one of these places. Here, people come to find answers they didn't know they were seeking." Griffin considered the man's words. The compass, the crystal, the fox. Each had guided him to this point. Perhaps the village was part of the journey, a place where he would uncover some hidden truth. The man noticed his thoughtful expression and leaned forward. "May I give you a bit of advice, young traveler?" Griffin nodded eagerly. "The path ahead will not always be clear," the man said. "But when you feel lost, remember to look within. Sometimes the answers we seek lie not in the world around us, but in the quiet places of our own hearts." Griffin felt the weight of this man's words as if they were a key to something deeper. He nodded, feeling both grateful and humbled. "Thank you. I'll remember that." The man smiled, his gaze shifting to the compass on the table. "Ah, a fine tool for such a journey," he remarked. "It seems you're headed toward the northern mountains." Griffin looked down at the compass, surprised. "How did you know?" The man chuckled. "A traveler's intuition. I'd venture to say that's where your answers lie. The mountains are ancient, older than most things in this land. They hold secrets few have uncovered." A shiver ran down Griffin's spine. He felt both excitement and trepidation at the thought of the mountains, their towering peaks veiled in mystery. The compass needle seemed to pulse faintly, as if agreeing with the man's words. The man rose, draping his cloak over his shoulders. "I must be on my way, but it was a pleasure to meet you, Griffin. May the winds guide you." Griffin blinked in surprise. He hadn't mentioned his name, yet the man spoke as if he had known him all along. "How did you—" But before Griffin could ask the question, the man had already disappeared out the door, leaving him alone with a quiet sense of awe. As he sat there, a voice broke his thoughts. "Excuse me, are you Griffin?" Griffin turned to see a young woman standing beside his table, her expression hopeful and slightly anxious. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back with a faded ribbon, and her eyes sparkled with a kindness that immediately put him at ease. "Yes, I'm Griffin," he replied, curious. "And you are?" "My name is Elara," she said, offering a shy smile. "I heard about a traveler passing through, one who might be on a journey to the mountains." Griffin felt a flicker of surprise. "I am, but how did you know?" Elara hesitated, looking down at her hands as if gathering her thoughts. "There's a legend in our village, a story passed down from generation to generation. It speaks of a traveler who will come one day, guided by the wind, and bring light to the hidden places of the mountains." Griffin's heart quickened. The wind had guided him here, leading him to the compass, the crystal, and now the village. Could the legend be about him? Elara looked up, her gaze steady. "I don't know if it's true, but when I saw you, I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like you might be the one from the legend." Griffin nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I don't know if I'm the one you're looking for, but something has been calling me, guiding me, and it led me here." Elara's face lit up with hope. "Then perhaps the legend is true, and you really are meant to go to the mountains. But be careful," she added, her expression growing very serious. "The path is not easy, and there are those who would try to stop you." Griffin felt a chill at her words, but he pushed it aside, determined. "Thank you, Elara. I'll be careful." Elara nodded, her eyes warm. "If you need supplies or direction, my family and I would be happy to help you. We live just up the road. My father knows these mountains well. He could give you guidance for the journey." Griffin felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you. I'll come by before I leave." As Elara turned to go, she paused, glancing back at him. "Good luck, Griffin. I hope you find what you're looking for." With that, she disappeared into the village, leaving Griffin alone with his thoughts. He spent the rest of the morning preparing for the journey, gathering supplies and making notes on the directions he'd need. As he walked through the village, he felt the warmth and kindness of its people, each one of them offering a small smile or a nod, as if sensing the importance of his journey. Before long, he found himself outside Elara's home, a modest cottage nestled near the edge of the village. Elara greeted him warmly, introducing him to her father, an older man with weathered hands and a quiet wisdom in his eyes. Elara's father shared stories of the mountains, tales of hidden trails and safe paths that would lead him closer to the heart of the peaks. Griffin listened intently, memorizing each detail. The mountains, he learned, were both beautiful and treacherous, filled with wonders and dangers alike. As he prepared to leave, Elara pressed a small pouch into his hand. "It's a charm for protection," she explained. "My grandmother made it. She said it would keep travelers safe on their journeys." Griffin smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Elara. I'll keep it close." With a final wave, he turned and set off toward the mountains, the compass in his hand pointing the way. The village faded behind him as he walked, its warmth lingering still in his heart. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with mystery and the unknown, but Griffin felt a deep sense of purpose guiding him forward. He was no longer just a young man on a journey. He was a traveler, a seeker of light, and he was ready to face whatever awaited him. As he approached the base of the mountains, the wind picked up, swirling around him in a gentle embrace. Griffin smiled, feeling its familiar presence. He took a deep breath, savoring the crisp, cool air, and began the climb. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks shrouded in mist, their ancient stones echoing with secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter 5: The Ascent into the Unknown. Griffin's boots crunched against the rocky path as he made his way up the mountainside. The landscape had shifted dramatically from the gentle slopes near the village to steep, winding trails carved into the rock. The air grew cooler, the scent of pine and moss blending with the freshness of the mountain breeze. Far below, he could just make out the village, its small houses clustered together like tiny dots against the green earth. As he climbed, Griffin noticed that the compass needle had begun to glow faintly, guiding him along the steep trail with unwavering certainty. The higher he went, the clearer his purpose seemed, as if the mountains themselves were calling him forward. The path was quiet, the silence broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird. Griffin's thoughts drifted back to Ilara's words and the protection of the charm that she had given him. He touched the small pouch at his side, feeling its comforting weight. It was a reminder that he was not alone, even here in the solitude of the mountains. The trail grew narrower as he ascended, hugging the side of the mountain. Griffin's breath became steady puffs as he focused on placing each step carefully. His eyes trained on the path. The air was thin and crisp, the kind of cold that felt both invigorating and challenging. He paused for a moment to catch his breath, looking out over the vast landscape below. From this height, he could see the rolling hills, the distant forests, and even a glimpse of the village where his journey had started. It was a view that filled him both with awe and humility. He realized how far he had come, and yet he knew there was still so much further to go. As he stood there, a sudden rustling caught his attention. He turned, searching for the source, and spotted a pair of amber eyes watching him from behind a cluster of rocks. For a moment, he froze, feeling his heart quicken. Then he recognized the creature. It was the fox, the same golden-furred companion that had guided him through the forest. The fox stepped out from his hiding place, padding softly over to him. It looked up at him with an expression that seemed almost knowing, as if it had been waiting for him. Griffin knelt down, reaching out a hand, and the fox sniffed it briefly before nudging his palm with its nose. "Well, my friend," Griffin murmured with a smile, "I didn't expect to see you again." The fox sat down, its gaze steady and calm, as if it had something important to communicate. Griffin felt a familiar tingle, a quiet understanding that flowed between them without the need for words. The fox's presence was a reassurance, a reminder that he was on the right path. Together, they continued up the mountain trail, the fox leading him along a series of twists and turns that would have been easy to miss on his own. Griffin followed closely, grateful for his companion's guidance. As they reached a small plateau, the landscape opened up before him, revealing a hidden valley nestled between the peaks. In the center of the valley stood a lake, its surface smooth and reflective, mirroring the blue sky above. The water seemed to glow with an inner light, casting a gentle shimmer across the surrounding rocks and trees. Griffin felt drawn to the lake, an inexplicable pull that tugged at his heart. He made his way down the slope, the fox following beside him, its paws silent on the soft earth. The lake's surface was calm, undisturbed by even the slightest ripple, as if it were holding its breath. As he approached, Griffin noticed something curious. The compass in his hand was glowing brighter, its needle pointing directly toward the lake. He knelt at the water's edge, peering into the depths. The water was crystal clear, allowing him to see smooth stones lying beneath the surface, each one gleaming with a soft, ethereal light. He reached out, dipping his hand into the water. The coolness of it sent a pleasant shiver up his arm, filling him with a sense of clarity and calm. As he swirled his fingers through the water, he noticed something glinting just below the surface. A small stone, different from the others, with a faint golden glow. With gentle care, he lifted the stone from the lake, holding it in his palm. It was smooth and round, warm to the touch, and it pulsed with a faint light that seemed to resonate with the crystal in his pocket. The two stones felt connected, as if they were pieces of the same mystery. Griffin held the stone up to the sunlight, watching as it caught the light and cast a soft glow across his face. In that moment, he felt a deep sense of understanding, a quiet certainty that he was meant to find this stone. The fox let out a soft bark, drawing his attention. It was watching him closely, its eyes filled with an expression of quiet approval. Griffin smiled, slipping the stone into his pocket alongside the crystal. The two objects seemed to hum softly together, their energies blending in a way that filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. The wind picked up around them, carrying a faint whisper that seemed to echo from the mountains themselves. Seek the light. Find the truth. Griffin closed his eyes, letting the words settle in his heart. He didn't fully understand their meaning, but he felt certain that they were guiding him towards something greater. The lake, the fox, the stone, each was a piece of the journey, a step closer to the truth he sought. As he opened his eyes, he noticed a narrow path winding up from the far side of the valley, leading deeper into the mountains. The fox looked at him, and then back at the path, as if encouraging him to continue. "Thank you," Griffin whispered, feeling a deep gratitude for his companion's guidance. He knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but he felt ready, prepared to face whatever waited him. With one last look at the lake, Griffin began the climb up the path, the fox trotting beside him. The air grew colder, the landscape shifting to rugged cliffs and towering peaks that seemed to touch the sky. Griffin's heart raced with anticipation as he pressed forward, feeling the weight of the stones in his pocket, their warmth a constant reminder of his purpose. The path had led him to a narrow ridge, where the ground dropped away on either side, leaving only a thin trail between the cliffs. Griffin moved carefully, each step deliberate, as he made his way across. The fox moved with ease, its light paws barely touching the ground as it darted ahead, waiting patiently for him to catch up. As they reached the other side, Griffin noticed a faint light flickering in the distance. It was coming from a small cave, nestled in the side of the mountain. The light glowed warmly, casting a gentle illumination across the rocks. Griffin felt a sense of excitement mixed with caution, the call of discovery tempered by the unknown. The fox led him to the entrance of the cave, pausing as if to assess the situation. Griffin took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the stones in his pocket. He knew that this was part of the journey, a place where he would find answers, or perhaps more questions. He stepped into the cave, his footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The light grew brighter as he moved deeper inside, illuminating the walls from a warm golden glow. The air was filled with a faint hum, a gentle vibration that seemed to resonate with the stones in his pocket. At the end of the cave, he found a small altar carved from the stone itself. On the altar lay a single feather, pure white and delicate, as if it had fallen from the wing of a mystical bird. Griffin reached out, picking it up carefully. The feather felt impossibly light, and as he held it, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, a quiet assurance that he was on the right path. The wind whispered through the cave, carrying a faint voice that seemed to come from within the stone walls. Continue your journey, seeker. The light will guide you. Griffin closed his eyes, letting the words fill his heart. The light, the stones, the feather, they were all pieces of a larger truth, a mystery that was slowly unfolding before him. With a sense of quiet resolve, Griffin placed the feather in his pocket alongside the stones. He turned and made his way out of the cave, stepping back into the sunlight where the fox waited for him. The path stretched out before him, winding up into the higher peaks, where the final answers awaited. Griffin looked down at his companion, feeling a surge of gratitude for the fox's guidance. Together, they began the ascent, the mountains rising like silent guardians around them. The journey was far from over, but Griffin felt ready. His heart was full of quiet strength and a deep understanding that he was exactly where he was meant to be.